Tonight on Bridge City News, many cities across southern Alberta had to dig out from an early snowfall. The city of Calgary broke a 104-year-old record for snow in October. The founder of Kijiji was in our city today talking about how entrepreneurs in Lethbridge can have a more competitive edge. And a Canadian wins the Nobel Prize for Physics. We have the details. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. It was a winter wonderland in many parts of southern Alberta again today. That made for some poor winter driving conditions. Many regions had a snowfall warning. There were reports of vehicles in the ditches on many of the highways, including Highway 2 and the Trans-Canada. RCMP said portions of Highways 1A and 1X were also impassable, and portions of Highway 1 between Canmore and Cochrane were also closed for a while. Police are asking motorists to check with 511 Alberta before heading out to check for real-time road conditions. The MA says road conditions west of Calgary are now beginning to improve since the snowfall ended.
They opened up Highway 1, so it looks like everything's starting to clear up. And I've been watching on the traffic cams here too, and noticing that they're starting to clear, and traffic is starting to move around. I think they're still struggling a little bit in the residential areas. So again, all that accumulated snow doesn't have anywhere to go. It just makes it difficult to move in and out of those unplowed areas. The issue that we were seeing wasn't so much the increase in call volume. It was being able to get around to those calls as they were coming in, obviously. Especially in Calgary, we saw this too, where just with being able to travel on the residential roads, it makes it difficult to get into the back alley. So it's not so much an increase in call volume as we were seeing the difficulty in moving around and getting out to the members.
People in Calgary are still digging out from the snowiest October day in 104 years, which is a new record. Parts of the city reported snowfall amounts yesterday up to 40 centimeters in a 12-hour period. Police reported more than 251 collisions, and dozens of flights were canceled or delayed at the Calgary International Airport. At one point, 80 transit buses were stuck or stalled on slippery streets. To help clear the mess, Edmonton, Red Deer, and Medicine Hat all sent snowplows to Calgary. The driving conditions in Lethbridge improved by the afternoon with the warming temperatures, but with ice and snow in this morning's work commute, police are advising people to drive with extra caution.
The first step to any type of winter driving is make sure your vehicle is properly equipped for winter driving. So if that means changing your tires to winter tires, great idea. It means putting stuff inside your vehicle in case you hit the ditch and you have to stay in your vehicle for a period of time. Let's be smart and able to save ourselves.
Leave extra space between you and the person in front of you. That way you have more time distance to come to a complete stop safely. Never use your cruise control on roads like this. A lot of people just have a habit of doing that. Just don't do that. Leave extra space for the snowplows and city workers. And let them do their work, and they'll clean up the roads the best they can. Another good idea is to signal well in advance, and that gives warning to the person behind you as to what your intentions are.
Police remind us to be mindful of first responders as they deal with calls during nasty winter weather.
We are going to go a little bit faster, but we'll just leave a bit extra space, and we try and put some decent tires on the vehicles this time of year as well.
First responders also have to drive these conditions, and we do as well. Slow down. We prepare our vehicles ahead of time. We put on winter tires, and our officers have extra training to deal with this type of stuff.
The snowfall warning ended for our region, and warmer temperatures are on the way. I'll have a complete look at the weather forecast coming up later in our newscast. In recognition of the quality medical services, Lethbridge EMS was given the next level of accreditation. Accreditation is based on leadership, quality, and safety. Q-Mentum Standards identifies the policies and practices that are put into place. Lethbridge Fire Chief Rich Hildebrand says the next level of accreditation speaks volumes to the quality of service Lethbridge EMS provides. Lethbridge EMS was originally accredited in August of 2012. The Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce welcomed a special guest speaker as part of the Opportunity South Summit. Earlier today, members of the local business community had a chance to hear the story of Janet Bannister, the founder of Kijiji, who is Canadian. Bannister says she saw an opportunity with the online buy and sell world and is now speaking to entrepreneurs who are looking for an edge in the very competitive market.
So to any young person out there who is thinking about doing a business, I would say that's fantastic. There's never been a better time. There's tons of great talent. I think the first thing is to figure out what is your business going to be. And on that, I'm a big believer in following your passions. And so I would encourage somebody to do something that they're passionate about, while at the same time thinking about, hey, what's unique about their business, what's the competitive dynamics, how big is the market, and all those fundamental things as well.
To build our summit, we just think there's so much opportunity in Southern Alberta, so if we have the chance to highlight that through high-profile speakers and bring attention to our city and our region, the Chamber is always happy to do that.
The summit was the third annual event as a part of the Lethbridge Leaders and Trade Show for local businesses. The City of Lethbridge wants to hear from you in regards to the ongoing drug crisis. You're invited to participate in community consultations. They'll take place Wednesday, October 10th from 1 till 3:30 p.m. or 5:30 till 8 p.m. and Thursday, October 11th at the same times at the Sandman Signature Lethbridge Lodge. Each session can accommodate up to 80 participants. Pre-registration is not mandatory but is recommended to guarantee a seat. To pre-register, send an email to the City of Lethbridge at communitysessions@lethbridge.ca. A Lethbridge man who pleaded guilty to 7 charges following a police chase in January has been sentenced to 628 days behind bars. 28-year-old Winston Hedgie was originally charged with 13 offenses, but the remaining 6 were dropped after he pleaded guilty to the other 7. He pleaded guilty to charges including possession of stolen property over $5,000, drug possession, and impaired driving. Last January, police were notified of a Coaldale House break-in and a stolen Ford truck. When police attempted to stop Hedgie, he ran into police cruisers. He then admitted he took fentanyl prior to the incident. On top of his prison sentence, Hedgie was also given a 3-year driving ban. Police say 2 missing siblings from Brandon, Manitoba and their mother have been found safely in St. Albert, just outside of Edmonton. Police say the kids, aged 6 and 8, were not dropped off at school last Friday after what was supposed to be a 2-day visit with their mother. When their father went to pick them up, they were nowhere to be found. Police say Jessica Charche has been arrested and faces several charges. The NDP government in Alberta is clamping down on independent faith-based schools. Education Minister David Eggen says he may defund and remove the school's accreditation if statements of faith are not removed. So I asked the president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, John Carpe, what kind of religious freedom we enjoy or not enjoy in this province.
These are serious threats, and it's a very serious violation. We do not have the religious freedom in this country that we had even 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And it's if citizens do not take action to defend religious freedom, it's just going to go away step by step.
Catch my full interview with Mr. Carpe discussing some of the biggest challenges which lie ahead for faith-based schools coming up in the second half of our show. An associate professor in Guelph, Ontario has won the Nobel Prize for Physics. Donna Strickland from the University of Waterloo became only the 3rd woman to do so. She was honored for being half of the team to discover chirped pulse amplification. It's a technique that works in conjunction with short pulse high-intensity lasers. The 59-year-old made the discovery while she was completing her PhD in New York. Strickland will share half the $1 million prize with her doctoral advisor, French physicist Gerard Mourou. Strickland says she expects more students will want to work with her now that she's a Nobel Prize winner.
So over the years when I've met people, they have said, you know, haven't you got that Nobel Prize yet? But I always thought they were kidding with me, right? So I didn't ever think that the CPA would merit that. Yeah, so obviously it's a real thrill, and I'm looking forward to talking to Gerard about it. People ask me that a lot too. Out of the 600 emails I've received so far today, Gerard and I have not talked to each other yet about it.
Can you describe in layman's terms what your research has done for the world and what it means, really? No.
That's a harder question because people keep asking first about the LASIK surgery, which is still the #1 use of the thing. That's not for those of you who've had LASIK surgery. It is a UV laser that recuts your cornea. It is cutting the cornea flap that this laser has worked on. And that was back in the 90s, so it was just 10 years after we first did CPA. I certainly heard about it just as that was happening and thought it was amazing at the time that I could have done a laser that was definitely being thought of for doing atomic and molecular physics.
Right.
I don't doubt that I'll have more students wanting to work with me. The student who's doing his fourth year project with me right now had to email me going, I was going to ask anyway, so sorry that it's the day, that you win the Nobel Prize, but it's not because of that.
The other $500,000 will go to Arthur Ashkin of the United States, who was the third winner of the Nobel Prize. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he plans to campaign for next year's election with the same positive style as the 2015 campaign. Trudeau says he will not participate in personal attacks.
It is so clear to me, from having had the experience in 2015, that a positive, compelling message that brings people together, that refuses the politics of personal attacks, that refuses the politics of division, of scare tactics, whether it's snitch lines or hijab attacks. That kind of approach that Stephen Harper tried does not work. And I remember actually being perhaps overly confident. I said to myself, when we went from that third-party distant corner of the House of Commons to forming a government in a single election, I said, you know what, we proved that the politics of negativity and attack don't work, and the politics of being positive, of expecting more, of treating electors and Canadians like rational, thoughtful, value-driven, intelligent citizens and not just blind consumers of politics of fear and division. We proved that that works, and that will have changed politics forever in this country.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will travel to North and South Korea, China, and Japan. It is a move Washington says will help in efforts to denuclearize North Korea.
I think it shows forward progress and momentum that the Secretary is making his fourth trip back in less than a year. The first, of course, was as CIA director. This will be his third as Secretary of State. And that shows the President's commitment to the agreement that he and Chairman Kim came to at the Singapore summit. The Secretary going on for follow-on conversations. As we often say, the conversations continue. Of course, we have quite a ways to go, but we look forward to the next steps in this conversation.
The Calgary Flames open the NHL season on the road against the Vancouver Canucks tonight. Flames head coach Bill Peters says his team will need to be responsible with a puck in the first game of the season.
Well, you know what, they're going to be hungry. They got some skill. They're, I think, good down the middle. They're deep down the middle, and they move the puck. Their D are looking to jump, so they're active. We're going to have to, make sure we manage the puck properly and play the right way. So we turn pucks over, they're going to be dangerous off the rush.
We just want to get going here. It's camp can get a little bit long at sometimes, or at some points, and for us with our travel and everything we've done, and we just want to get the season going. So.
And good luck this season to both the Calgary Flames and the Edmonton Oilers. Move over Liam. The most popular name for boys in Alberta last year was Noah. Liam came in second after being on top for 5 years. For baby girls, Olivia was the most popular name. That has been the case since 2013. Other top girl names include Emma, Charlotte, Ava, and Sophia. The other top boys' names were Benjamin, Logan, Lucas, and William. And every one of those people with those names in southern Alberta probably has a sore back from all of the shoveling they've been doing. The snowfall warning has ended for our region. Good news, more sunshine is on the way. I'll have a complete look at the weather forecast coming up shortly. The snowfall warning for our region has ended today, and the meltdown was on a little bit today with some sunshine. Tonight, a few clouds developing with a low near -5. A 30% chance of flurries again tomorrow with a high near 4. A high pressure system moves in on Friday, bringing lots of sunshine and a high near 10. Saturday, mainly sunny and mild again with a high of 7. Sunday, we'll have a mixture of sun and cloud and a high of 5 degrees. Thanksgiving holiday Monday, the snow returns with the mercury dropping down to 0. Checking our almanac, the average high for this time of year is 17 degrees and an average low of 3. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1943 at 30 degrees, and the record low was -7 in 1950. Sunrise was at 7:34, sunset at 7:07. Let's have a look at how tomorrow is shaping up across the country. Sunny and warm in Vancouver tomorrow with a high near 13 expected. Victoria will be even warmer at 14. A good chance of snow again in Calgary tomorrow with a high near +2. Edmonton will be mainly cloudy and 8 degrees. Regina will have lots of sunshine and 4. Saskatoon will be mainly cloudy and 4 degrees as well. Lots of cloud cover in Winnipeg expected tomorrow with a high near 6. Much warmer in the central part of the country. Toronto should hit 20 degrees with periods of rain. Ottawa will also have showers and get up to 22. Montreal will have showers in 20. Over the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will have rain in 22. Halifax, Nova Scotia had a rainfall warning today. More drizzle expected tomorrow and a high near 20. A slight chance of showers for Charlottetown PEI tomorrow with a high near 22. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, it'll be mainly sunny and 14 degrees on Thursday. The federal government is restarting talks with First Nations opposed to the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion project. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Ottawa will not appeal the federal court decision in August that said it did not adequately consult with Indigenous groups. He says taking it to the courts could delay construction for many years. The government is appointing former Supreme Court Justice Frank Iacobucci to oversee the new round of consultations. Canada's Natural Resources Minister says his government has to do a better job building relationships and consulting with Indigenous groups. Amarjeet Sohi says those consultations will begin again.
Our government has decided to reinitiate Phase 3 consultations with Indigenous groups impacted by the project. We are going to do things differently this time. First, government representatives on the ground will have a clear mandate to conduct meaningful consultations and be empowered to discuss reasonable accommodations with Indigenous groups on the issues that are important to them. Second, we're going to work with First Nations and Métis communities and seek their views on how to get Phase 3 right.
Prime Minister Trudeau is celebrating the largest private investment in Canadian history with a $40 billion natural gas export terminal in British Columbia. Now, one of our Ottawa contributors, Brian Lilly, asked the question, is it okay to export natural gas out of BC, but not oil?
Here's the question. If it's okay to export liquefied natural gas out of a port like Kitimat, why isn't it okay to export oil out of these places? But the Trudeau government has been clear, you can't export oil out of ports like Kitimat. You can't export oil or have pipelines going through much of BC's northern coast, and you can't have tanker ships there, even though, as we've talked about before, Hal, those tanker ships go up and down those same waters, bringing oil from Alaska to California on pretty much a daily basis.
Catch my full interview with Mr. Lilly after Business News, discussing oil, natural gas, and more on the new trade deal, the USMCA, coming up shortly. There may be a future for Toys R Us in the United States after all. The troubled kids retail store, which shut down 800 locations over the summer, now has a group of investors looking at scrapping an auction for assets and instead revive the chain. Investors believe they will have a better return on investment if they bring the store back. Unlike its American counterpart, Toys R Us Canada did not close its stores. The company hooked up with Fairfax Financial Holdings to keep the Canadian stores open. The California-based company Lime is targeting the Canadian market with their dockless electric scooters. They made their debut in Waterloo, Ontario recently. A Lime manager says the company focuses on getting people out of their cars.
We provide multiple technologies that really focus on getting people out of cars and into something that is healthier, cleaner, alternative form of transportation. So that is where the motor is at. It's actually underneath that stand right there. This is the baseboard, obviously designed for one person to ride, intentionally done, but also built to be pretty sturdy to handle the terrain that they're going to hit. Coming into our neighbor up north is a really, really exciting opportunity for us. We feel like there's actually a lot of initial crossover of residents here who have seen it somewhere in the United States. Anytime a new product comes to the ground, you always find users trying to do something funny. But that behavior, like the novelty runs out pretty quick after a week of operating. So that behavior really tends to die off as time goes on. Way too much of city infrastructure has been dedicated for cars too long. So what we really want to do is encourage cities to build better and more infrastructure that gets cyclists and scooter riders into safer environments, whether that's protected bike lanes or bike lanes in general.
You know, those scooters are great for summer, but for the wintertime, might need some winter tires. Now here's a look at today's markets. We have breaking news for you this hour. The city of Kelowna, BC won the bid to host the 2020 Memorial Cup. Lethbridge was in the running to host junior hockey's biggest tournament for the first time ever. If Lethbridge would have landed the Memorial Cup, it would have guaranteed a spot for the Lethbridge Hurricanes to compete as the host team. The last time the Canes were in the Memorial Cup was in 1997 when they lost in the final to the Hull Olympique. When you see news happening, drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's top stories, check out our full newscast online at bridgecitynews.ca. Canada finally signed on to a new trilateral trade deal called the USMCA. One of our Ottawa contributors, Brian Lilly, gives us his thoughts next, if it in fact was a good deal for Canada. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Come out to the Thanksgiving dinner and dance being held Friday, October 5th in the Memorial Hall at the Lethbridge Legion, beginning at 6 p.m. Enjoy a delicious Thanksgiving meal followed by a dance at 7:30 p.m. Live musical entertainment will feature Faye Stevens. There will also be door prizes and a 50-50 draw. Meal cost is $10 per person and dance tickets are also $10, $9 for members. Deciding where to live in your senior years is a major decision. Come to the Seniors Housing Fair at the Nordbridge Senior Citizens Association on Wednesday, October 24th from 1 to 4 p.m. Take advantage of this opportunity to speak with a number of representatives from various housing providers from Lethbridge and surrounding areas and find out which place meets your unique needs. There's no cost to attend. For more information, call Lori Penner at 403-329-3222 or visit norbridgeseniors.com. Looking for a fun place where you and your kids can play? Come for a fun family night Thursday evenings from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. to the Family Center in downtown Lethbridge. Me and My Family promotes learning through play and provides a safe place for kids to explore through physical activity, imagination, and creativity. For more information, visit famcenter.ca or call 403-320-4232. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
The new trilateral trade deal is officially complete with the USMCA, or the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Now, Ottawa journalist Brian Lilly has been following this story closely. Brian, you say Canada kind of got the short end of the stick with this deal.
Look, Hal, as far as I'm concerned, the best part of this deal is the fact that it sounds like the old YMCA song. USMCA. We're all going to be doing a dance to it in a little while, but it's not particularly good for Canada. We still have tariffs on steel and aluminum. We still have no agreement on softwood lumber. We gave up on dairy. We're accepting quotas on our automotive parts and production. So if this is what a win looks like for Justin Trudeau, I don't want to see what defeat looks like. One of the newspapers had a front page cartoon of Trudeau holding up the deal and saying, hooray, it's not horrible. And that kind of sums it up. This is not a good deal for Canada. Now, I am firmly in the camp of any deal. We need a deal. No deal is the bad deal. The Prime Minister spent the summer saying he wouldn't sign a bad deal, that no deal would be better than a bad deal. So he thinks this is a good one. I don't think so. And when the Washington Post is declaring this a victory for Donald Trump, that tells you something. They're not overly friendly to Donald Trump, and they're declaring this a major victory for the U.S. president. It clearly was. This was not a victory for Canada. We gave up all those things I mentioned. We're going to see an increase in the price of prescription drugs as a result of this deal, a whole host of other factors. And when you ask the Canadian officials, well, what did we get? They say, well, we got to keep cultural exemptions and a dispute resolution mechanism. Those were both in the old deal. We didn't get those. That's from the old deal.
You know, we talked to a dairy producer, dairy farmer yesterday in Fort Macleod, Alberta, who said the same thing. He was very disappointed in the government. He said basically the government turned his back on dairy producers.
Look, if we're going to give up on dairy, we're going to give ground on dairy. And it's not just the 3.59%. It's the Class 6 and Class 7 milk. Now, I know that can be very technical, but these were new classifications of milk that dairy producers thought was going to be their profit. That was going to be their future. And now we're just going to kind of give those up. Well, it would be okay to give those up. It would be okay to accept quotas on autos. It would be okay to accept all of these different things if we got something else back. If we got some kind of Okay, well, you're giving up that. We'll give you greater access on this. We didn't get any of that. We got nothing. So I understand. I'm not a fan of supply management. You know, I'm not out there campaigning to get rid of it every day, but I'm not a huge fan. But I get why the dairy farmers are angry today. I get why steel and aluminum producers are angry, why automakers and auto workers are nervous. This is not good for Canada.
Brian, the New Deal also blocks American Super Bowl ads from running on Canadian TVs during the big game, and it was at the insistence of the Americans.
Yeah, now full disclosure, I host a talk radio show on a station owned by Bell Media, which owns the rights for broadcasting the TV ads on CTV or TSN or whatever. Okay, so I just want that out there so nobody says that I'm towing the party line on this. It wasn't Bell Media that said, you've got to fix this. It was the NFL, and I'll tell you why, Hal. Because the NFL's upset. Bell Media had to pay an awful lot of money to get those NFL rights, and they were planning on charging so much money on every given Sunday and Thursday night games and all of this, and then lots of money at the Super Bowl. And then the CRTC turns around and says, no, you've got to show the American ads. Well, all of a sudden, the NFL's looking and saying, if that stays the way it is, we can't charge them as much money next time because it's not as lucrative. So it wasn't Canada saying you've got to do it. Bell Media had complained to the government, they'd complained to the CRTC, and they were told, yeah, get lost. Canadians want to see the ads. But the NFL went to the Trump administration and said, this is a problem for us, and it sets a dangerous precedent. So it's in there at the insistence of the NFL for very legitimate business reasons. You would be paying a heck of a lot less for the Super Bowl rights if you couldn't even sell any ads during the biggest game of the year.
Now, Brian, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada is celebrating the single largest private investment in Canadian history with a $40 billion liquefied natural gas export terminal on BC's north coast, and the feds are pitching in with $275 million in federal support.
Yeah, and BC's going to throw in some money as well. It makes more sense for BC to throw in some money because they're going to make it all back in royalties, and the fact that this natural gas now has a place to go, it's got a customer base. And maybe you remember this deal when it was just a $36 billion deal that got canceled back in 2016. It was mainly Petronas, the Malaysian-based state enterprise that was behind it. Now it's a consortium that has come together to get behind this deal. In 2016, they walked away. There were many reasons. There was the new NDP government in British Columbia. There were regulatory hurdles at the federal and provincial level, and there was a drop in the price of natural gas. All those things combined, they walked away. They said, we're not doing it. The huge blow to the Canadian economy. Now they've brought in some extra outside partners on the business side. They've got some government support, and they've announced they're going to go ahead. Here's the question. If it's okay to export liquefied natural gas out of a port like Kitimat, why isn't it okay to export oil out of these places? But the Trudeau government has been clear. You can't export oil out of ports like Kitimat. You can't export oil or have pipelines going through much of BC's northern coast, and you can't have tanker ships there, even though, as we've talked about before, Hal, those tanker ships go up and down those same waters, bringing oil from Alaska to California on pretty much a daily basis.
Brian, for the first time since 1966, Quebec will be governed by a party outside of the Liberals or the Parti Québécois. A right-leaning party, the CAQ, won a majority. Right-leaning, so I'm kind of thinking to myself, okay, we've got Tories elected in Saskatchewan, we've got Manitoba, Ontario, now Quebec perhaps, and Alberta in the spring. It'll make for some fun times with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau dealing with all these Tory premiers.
It's very different than when he was elected, and Brad Wall was the lone dissenting voice that wasn't on the left. They were all either Liberals or New Democrats at that point, and now the tide is starting to shift. And let me put this in perspective, Hal. I'm 46 years old, same age as the Prime Minister, and born in 1971. The last time a party other than the Liberals or the Parti Québécois won an election in Quebec was 1966. It was 5 years before I was born. It was before my parents were dating, before they came to Canada. It was all of those things. That's a lifetime ago. It has been a federalist, separatist divide since then, and now they've chosen a party that is neither federalist nor separatist. It brings people from both sides. The leader, Francois Legault, I used to cover him when I was a reporter in Montreal, and he was a Parti Québécois cabinet minister. I think he had industry. He may have had finance at one point. He's a former Air Transat executive who always seemed out of place in the very left-wing Parti Québécois, but he was on the sovereignist side at that point. Now he says, look, I don't want to deal with sovereignty. I don't want to talk about it. We're going to make Quebec great inside Canada, and we're going to do it by focusing on the economy. Now, there are still issues, like today he was asked about using the notwithstanding clause on things like the hijab or the niqab, and he says, I'll do that. Of course, Quebec has a long history of using the notwithstanding clause, and they get away with it, unlike, say, Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who it's the end of civilization if he does it. But Quebec, they've got a long history. But primarily, Legault is going to focus on turning Quebec's economy around. Some say Quebec's economy is doing fine. I look at it. I look at their unemployment rate, their labor participation rate, the fact that they still get $15 billion in equalization payments. And I say they're not living up to their potential. They could be doing so much more. Let's hope Legault gets on that track. It'll be good for all of Canada if he does.
Do you think some of the illegal border crossings also played a role in this Quebec provincial election?
Absolutely huge role in this election. Quebec is always anxious about immigration. They're anxious about people assimilating into the culture, adopting French. The fact that we've had more than 34,000 people cross the border illegally. And, again, the government, the federal government's out there saying, don't call them illegal. That's the wrong word. Well, there's a giant sign at the border that says, don't cross here. It's illegal. And you've got Mounties saying, don't cross here. It's illegal. We'll arrest you. You got 34,000 people going across one road that links Quebec and New York State. And they're all arriving in Quebec. Yeah, this has added an awful lot to this. And Philippe Couillard, the Liberal Premier, at first was on board with it. He was fine. Then as he realized he's falling in the polls, started to adjust. So yeah, this was a big role. But so is the fact that the Liberals have been in power for almost the totality of the last 15 years. Eventually, people get tired of looking at your face.
Now, there's stories floating around that Governor General Julie Payette is not really happy with her job. And in a recent sit-down interview, she says, she's not perfect, but she's trying to do the job to the best of her abilities. Just after the interview aired, it was announced that she would not attend the Governor General History Awards.
Yeah. If your name is in the awards, Hal, I think you should show up. If there was the Hal Roberts Broadcasting Awards and it wasn't named for you after you'd passed, I think you would want to show up to those. The Hal Roberts Award for Excellence, given out to the best person in your town. You'd want to show up. You'd want to hand out the award. Hey, you're as good as Hal Roberts. If the Governor General has awards named for her, why isn't she showing up? But she's not. She doesn't think it's an issue. There's been some speculation that these story leaks that came out, as a couple of different newspapers had these stories about her being unhappy, that it may have been the PMO, Justin Trudeau's office, trying to take her out. She's pushing back with this sit-down TV interview, but I don't think she did herself any favors because she doesn't look likable, she doesn't look relatable, and she doesn't sound like she's being completely honest. My guess is those stories are true. She doesn't like the job. She doesn't like the intrusion on her privacy, and the $290,000 a year that we're paying her isn't enough for what she's had to give up.
That's a lot of coin. After cell service failed when the tornadoes hit Ottawa, there are calls by opposition MPs now to have a Commons Committee study the reliability of mobile networks in emergency situations. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, and it's not even MPs from the Ottawa area. One of them is from the Edmonton area, I believe, Dane Lloyd. But Conservatives and New Democrats are saying, hold on, are the mobile towers, more and more of us are cutting landlines, right? I don't know the last time you called for getting cable or internet installed in your house. They'll try and give you the phone line for free. Well, we'll give you a landline. It's only $5. And you almost feel guilty saying no. That used to be the bread and butter of these companies. And the old landlines, you remember, the power would go up. You could still call your friends. You could still call your family. Well, it's not always the same with cell towers. They have battery backup. They have diesel backup. Eventually, they run out. And that's what happened when 6 tornadoes, I don't know if folks realize this, but it was 6 different tornadoes hit the Ottawa-Gatineau region about a week and a half ago. Caused a lot of damage in some spots. And as people are trying to call around to family, to friends, to speak to emergency services, our city manager had to go drive into the middle of town till he could find cell service to speak to his staff to find out what was going on, because it happened on a Friday night. I happened to be out at the Ottawa Senators game that night. Cell service in that area was fine, but as soon as I left, I noticed text messages weren't going through. I couldn't get calls. And this happened throughout the weekend. And so I think it's a smart move, you know, whether it's Ottawa or years ago it was a tornado in Edmonton, it could be a hurricane in Halifax, anywhere in the country, we're going to keep having these issues. Are the mobile networks robust enough for when an emergency happens?
Now, we only have a few short moments left here. After a series of recalls this year, Health Canada has banned imports from a Chinese company because their factory was not up to standard.
Yeah, these guys are making drugs for heart medication and such. And my reaction, Hal, wasn't, oh, good, they're banning this factory. It was, why are we importing drugs from China? It was just a few short years ago that they were recalling dog food from China and powdered infant formula from China because they were putting ingredients that shouldn't be in there. Well, now we're bringing in drugs from China. It doesn't seem like a safe place for me. To relate this back to the free trade agreement with the United States and Mexico, if we start negotiating a free trade deal with China, we have to alert the U.S. and Mexico. They also have to alert us because they're not viewed as being good actors on the world stage. They're not a market economy. China's not the type. I'm fine with importing plastic toys and plastic dishes that will, you know, carry things around in. I don't want to be bringing in drugs or anything else or food, anything I'm going to ingest. I don't want it coming from a country that doesn't have the types of standards that we don't, and China doesn't right now. They've got a bad track record. I'm shocked that Health Canada was even allowing this in the first place and that they had to ban it, but good on them for getting on.
Okay, one more quick question. Federal election is coming up in the fall of 2019. Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says he can turn his party around. But can he?
It will be a tough move. You know, he's out there being quizzed of, are you going to back this LNG pipeline? He's hemming and hawing. He's really not sure. You know, if he backs it, it makes Justin Trudeau look good. But hey, John Horgan, the BC NDP premier, likes it. He doesn't know what to do. That's always the case with Jagmeet Singh. He doesn't fundraise well. He doesn't poll well. He has to get in the legislature. He has to win the by-election in Burnaby. If he doesn't, he's in trouble, and he will be the reason that Justin Trudeau gets a second term. More than Justin Trudeau, more than Andrew Scheer. If he keeps the NDP on this trajectory, there'll be an awful lot of progressive left-wing voters that go to Justin Trudeau because they're not even going to know who Jagmeet Singh is. It'll be Jagmeet who?
Right. One of our Ottawa contributors, Brian Lilly, joining me via Skype. Thanks again, Brian.
Thank you.
The NDP in Alberta has been clamping down on independent faith-based schools over the issue of sex ed curriculum, gay straight alliances, and parental rights. Joining me now via Skype is John Carpe, president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms. Welcome back to BCN, John.
Good to see you, Hal.
Now, what's the latest in this ongoing clash? I understand there's a very concerning development with a threatening letter that has been recently sent out.
Alberta's Education Minister, David Eggen, has sent threatening letters to religious schools all over Alberta, Christian schools that I'm aware of, possibly also to Muslim and Jewish schools, I don't know. And the Christian schools have been told that they must remove from their anti-bullying policies references to the Bible as being God's word or the Bible as being truth. They have to remove statements about Christian understanding of marriage and sexuality. They have to remove statements saying that men and women are created in God's image and have distinctive roles. They have to remove statements saying that sexual activity is for marriage only. And the range of threats include up to defunding and de-accreditation of schools if they do not bend to the education minister's edict.
Now, the core value of we believe men and women were created in the likeness of God and his image and therefore have transcendent intrinsic worth. Does the education minister not see the point of this? The statement, by definition, provides a safe and caring environment for every student, including LGBTQ kids. It sounds like perhaps the government is insisting that everyone needs not only to tolerate, but agree with their view on sexuality.
Well, that's really what's going on here, because the past 3.5 years, we've been told previously that all this anti-bullying stuff and gay straight alliances, that there was no ideology involved in a gay straight alliance. It's just a support group for kids to meet over pizza. They don't promote a particular worldview or ideology or theology, or if they do, it's not one that's incompatible with, say, with Christianity or with other religions. But that's proving to be a lie, because now we've got an education minister who says that a school's anti-bullying policies cannot make reference to Christian understanding of the world or of sexuality. So, the positive thing here, perhaps, is that the government is finally being honest and saying, well, yeah, a gay straight alliance is not actually compatible with a Christian school. It's not neutral. It does have a particular ideology. That's what the government's now saying, at least indirectly, by making these threats.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but this sounds a bit like the government's view of diversity essentially means we believe in allowing differing points of view as long as they're the same as mine.
Yeah. Well, the question that I think some of these schools are going to be asking the education minister is, why is it disrespectful of diversity? And I, use the quotation marks because that's one of the terms in the legislation. But why is it disrespectful of diversity for a school to say that they believe that the Bible is the inerrant, infallible, unchanging Word of God? And yet this is exactly the education ministry has said this in writing. You have to remove this reference to the Bible being the Word of God, because that is contrary to diversity, and diversity is required by law. So these are serious threats, and it's a very serious violation. We do not have the religious freedom in this country that we had even 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And it's if citizens do not take action to defend religious freedom, it's just going to go away step by step. With things like, you'd think, oh, well, what's the big deal? We might as well just, take the Christian references out of the anti-bullying policy. Yet if you give up on little steps like that, you just get into a worse and worse situation.
It's quite interesting that Alberta Education takes issue with the statement that parents are the primary educators and that the school will involve parents as appropriate and necessary regarding their children's participation in school student groups. Now, what's the concern there?
Well, Bill 24 was passed in Alberta requiring secrecy about kids attending gay straight alliances or GSA-related activities. And so it's illegal in Alberta for teachers and principals to inform parents about what is going on with their own children at school, their own children as young as 5. It's sad. Like a mother or father would never let a child join a sports club, dance studio, martial arts club, church youth group. You'd never let your kid join a club if you were told that there's going to be some secret things taking place within that club or sports activity. There's going to be some secret things going on. We're not going to tell you. Parents wouldn't sign up their kids for that. Yet this is what's going on in Alberta schools.
So what are you hearing? What kind of feedback are you receiving from parents, not just Christian parents, but maybe Muslim and other parents as well?
Well, parents, when they learn about this, they're shocked. I mean, most parents in Alberta have no idea that every school must set up a GSA the moment that one student asks for one. Most parents don't know that a GSA is advocating for a certain anti-Christian and anti-Muslim, anti-Jewish perspective on sexuality. Most parents don't know that it's illegal for teachers and principals to inform parents what's going on with your own kids. When people find out about this, they're not very happy. And, certainly the mainstream media are not providing coverage for this. I mean, so far, the news release was sent out on last week, and here we are 5 days later. I've gotten lots and lots of calls from different Christian media outlets, but I have yet to get a single call from, actually it changed today, somebody from the Calgary Herald called, but the last few days, the CBC and the mainstream newspapers are just not covering this.
Now, what about this statement from religious schools? God created mankind as male and female, equal in dignity and worth, yet with distinct and complementary roles.
Well, that's a statement that goes contrary to what the education minister's personal views about sexuality and gender. He's one of these progressive types who thinks that, you could just, if you wake up tomorrow morning and you feel like a woman, well, then you are a woman. Or if you next week, if you feel like you're a man, you are a man, that gender is based on feelings, and that you should just get gender reassignment surgery to change your body to match your feelings. That's his view. Now, in a free country, he's entitled to his opinion if that's what he wants to believe. Unfortunately, he's imposing this belief on all the schools. And so if a school says, well, we're created male and female, which is the scientific truth in addition to being scriptural, the education minister doesn't like that. So he's saying, well, you got to take that out of your policies. So he is imposing his personal beliefs on every school in Alberta, and that's a serious threat to freedom.
This also reminds me a lot of the attestation from the Summer Jobs Grant Program. Federally speaking, you don't believe with the Liberals' ideology. When it comes to abortion and gay rights and so forth, we're not going to give you funding for your landscaping business. So there are a lot of similarities, comparables here.
Yes, the federal policy that in order to access this federal program, you needed to tick off a box saying that you agree with Justin Trudeau that abortion should be legal during all 9 months of pregnancy, and you got to tick off the box to agree to that. In a way, that was more extreme, although it was also about something that was a little bit less important, because you wouldn't get a grant. Okay, here we're talking about actually shutting down Christian schools if the school doesn't bend the knee to the education minister's view on sexuality. The schools have to actually put the education minister's viewpoint into their own policies and pretend that that's their own policy. And if he defunds or de-accredits these schools, that's a very serious threat to their ongoing continuation.
Now, John, some of the schools include the statement, God's institution of marriage is a covenant relationship between one man and one woman, is the sole environment within which sexual activity is permitted, and is the context in which children are to be raised. And again, our education minister, David Eggen, has a real problem with that.
I'd like to ask him why. And I think the schools, at least some of them, will be asking, why is that a problem? The other thing is, the whole idea of loving your neighbor, being kind to other people, being compassionate towards the vulnerable, these are religious ideas. They're not in the realm of science. Science can't measure love or dignity or tell you how to behave. Science has its place and is very valuable. But when it comes to these questions about how do you live your life, how do you treat other people, these are religious ideas that we should be kind to other people. And yet we've got the minister, who was born thousands of years after these ideas were first articulated, and he's saying you've got to take these religious ideas out of the anti-bullying policies. So it's really his atheistic or secular ideology that he's going to impose on these schools.
John, can you comment on the statement regarding schools that say if the parents' or students' faith and or values are incompatible with the schools, then staff will help them find another school to attend that'll maybe be more suitable for them?
That statement is another one that the government has told schools that they have to take that out of their policies. This is just a common sense statement that if you are not in favor of the school's values and policies and beliefs and so on, that the following year you shouldn't be there. This is why we have different schools in Alberta. You can go to a public school, Catholic school, charter school, private religious school, private non-religious school, homeschool. I mean, the list goes on. So sometimes things are not going to be a good fit, and so the common sense thing to do is to find a different school that's a better fit. You know, this is just silliness on the part of the government. I mean, the schools could take out that policy, wouldn't really matter. But, you know, why would you not want schools to assist people in finding a better fit?
So this may likely come down to another clash of human rights versus religious rights. What are the odds of actually winning this case? And are there any precedent-setting examples or cases where religious schools have won the right to religious freedom?
Well, in 2015, the Supreme Court of Canada handed down a decision in a case called Loyola versus Quebec. And this was a case where the Quebec government forced every school in the province, including this one private Catholic school, was to teach religion and ethics from the government's viewpoint, which was secularist, atheistic, relativist. And this private Catholic school said, no, we're not doing that. Went all the way up to the Supreme Court, which ruled in favor of the school and said, the government cannot coerce this private Catholic high school to refrain from teaching from a Catholic perspective. It's a Catholic school, it's going to teach from a Catholic perspective. And so that case would be relevant to this situation. But there is no court action about school closures, and I hope it doesn't come to that. But if the minister decides to defund or de-accredit schools, the only choice then would be to very quickly go to court and have reinstatement.
John, we have a provincial election coming up in the spring of 2019. There may be a change of government. If that's the case, is it possible that this sort of education legislation could be repealed?
I would certainly hope so. But in the interim, we have to take a strong stance against it and not allow ourselves to be bullied by this minister who wants to impose his personal views on Christian schools. But yeah, hopefully the legislation will change, and then the court action that does exist, which is to challenge the secrecy provisions and other aspects, could potentially also be withdrawn if a new government makes sufficient changes.
John Carpe, president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, thanks a lot for joining me again today.
Thanks for having me on your show.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.